University of Richmond.
I'm Rita McCann, and I'm an attorney in Huntsville, Alabama.
Hi, I'm Thomas Mackey at the University of Louisville History Department and the Brandeis School of Law at U of L.
All right, if we could have our students introduce themselves and the teacher coach.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Baharlius, and I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hi, I'm Sophie Brown, and I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hi, I'm Ananya Chandra, and I'm also a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hello, I'm Andrew Flatt, also a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Hi, I'm Andrew Yuen. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School, and this is our advisor, Mr. Broadman and Mr. Mark Mondry.
Good morning.
Good to see everybody. Hey, Alan, I hear this is your last ride.
Yes, it is.
And what a ride it's been. You've done a fantastic job through the years, and I'm sure that this crew has done a fantastic job with you.
They have. They're wonderful. They've been fantastic, and Mark will be the man taking over for me when this is all said and done. So
I hope he's got some gigantic feet because he's got some big shoes to fill.
Right.
Thank you very much, Hank. Thank you.
No pressure, guys.
but that's all good. We're all here to have a good time. We're going to have a good discussion about question number 3, unit 3. So I'll read the question and then we will hear your opening. So, all right, unit 3. In 2020, we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which recognized the right of women to vote. Despite recent controversy, the Equal Rights Amendment has not yet been declared ratified. What are the similarities and differences between these two amendments? What impact, if any, has the 19th Amendment had on women in achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments rather than ratifying the National Constitutional Amendment? We look forward to your opening statement.
Similarities between the 19th Amendment and the Equal Rights Amendment include limiting the government's power to discriminate on account of sex, being the result of social movements, enhancing equality, addressing and empowering women, and attempting to expand the polity. Both documents limit inequitable acts by the government, stating that certain rights shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. They are both the result of social movements by the people. The 19th Amendment was born out of the Seneca Falls Convention, where individuals gathered to demand women's rights, while the Equal Rights Amendment was drafted by Alice Paul to expand equality. Both of these documents sought to reinforce the concept of equality, reflected in Susan B. Anthony's statement that it was we the people, not we the white male citizens who formed the Union, women as well as men.
Differences between the 19th and Equal Rights Amendments include the scope of rights guaranteed, public approval, and effectiveness for non-white women. The rights assured differ is the 19th Amendment protects women's suffrage, while the ERA addresses the broader concept of equality. This lack of equality was reflected in state limitations on women serving on juries, which was found unconstitutional in Taylor v. Louisiana. The 19th Amendment was originally ratified by 49 states, but Professor Lewis Boltz notes that support for the ERA was unstable and declined over time. In practice, the 19th Amendment limited the vote to white women. For example, North Carolina state legislature introduced a grandmother clause, which disenfranchised African American women.
The 19th Amendment had important foundational impacts on women's equality, but they have been limited, particularly in comparison to statutes and judicial decisions. The vote is a foundation for women to actuate their equality. As Professor Ellen Dubois notes, any effort to effect social change for women could not be secured without the franchise. The vote did not immediately provide women equality, akin to the situation faced by African Americans after the passage of the 13th Amendment. While women were able to pass the Shepherd-Towner Act, which provided aid for maternal and child health clinics, it was defunded in 1929. Professor Liette Gidlow notes that the 19th Amendment advanced equality between the sexes, but left intersecting equalities of class, race, and ethnicity intact. It helped women, above all white women, find new footings, and yet left most outside the halls of power. The amendment inspired women's movements around the world. Suffragists in Cuba called for the recognition of women's rights at the International Conference of American States. However, nations like Italy and France were similarly slow and didn't accept women's suffrage until after World War II.
Advantages of state ERAs include flexibility, better reflection of state polities, enhanced federalism, and easier passage. The flexibility of state ERAs could allow them to create different physical standards for men and women entering police or fire departments, enhancing safety and equality as they see fit. And the interest of the polity can be better reflected as seen in Narrow v. Johnson, when New Mexico Supreme Court found the withholding of Medicaid funds for medically necessary abortions to be unconstitutional. State ERAs enhance federalism as they allow states to define and protect equality as they see fit within their borders.
Disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments include lack of national uniformity, unequal protection of rights, ease of amending state constitutions, and the possibility of some states not passing an amendment at all. Lack of uniformity could occur as state ERAs can vary in what they cover, limiting the actuation of equality. If Roe v. Wade was overturned, then states like Louisiana, which have passed heartbeat bills to limit abortion, could implement that legislation, while other states would still allow the procedure. In comparison to the US Constitution, Professor Lawrence H. Tribe notes that the cluttered and rapidly changing contents of state constitutions may explain why these documents rarely command the respect paid to the federal Constitution.
Thank you. So why do we need an ERA if we already have the 14th Amendment?
I believe that we need an equal rights amendment in order to somewhat codify these sort of social progressive movements that we've seen towards women's rights in the past few years. For example, the Me Too movement has drastically changed the way that we've talked about things like sexual harassment and violence in the workplace. And I believe that even though these efforts are valiant, they're already very strong. I believe that they would be even made stronger by a codification like an amendment. And it's also important to pass an amendment so that it is not subject to the changing of Congress or the presidency of the United States. It is the utmost codification of the progress we've seen towards women's equality and rights.
I agree.
Well, I think that.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
I agree with this. I think that the permanence of an equal rights amendment is one of its most important aspects. We can see that Obama in 2009 passed the Fair Pay Act, but this was not as stable as an amendment would have been, and later Trump tried to repeal this. So we need something that is firm and set in place to protect the rights of women.
I also think that larger than that, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, this is something that's really symbolic, something that, in future cases of equality, we can look to it as, the symbol for women's rights, and it won't be something that we have to argue about through, some cluttered mess that we have currently.
Yeah, but you seem to think that somehow an amendment, some addition to the fundamental document of the country is going to bring about social change or equality among the genders. I'm not sure I see that connection is going to be that strong. I just don't. I don't see how passing an amendment, which in fact is not that stable. We've already overturned one, so I don't see the faith that you're putting into it. Help me understand that approach.
I would agree with you. I don't think an amendment would be as effective in actuating equality as much as, say, legislation or a judicial decision would be. For example,
legislation where? States, federal?
Both.
Help me understand.
For example, at the federal level, we had the Violence Against Women Act under the previous administration, which protected women specifically in cases of domestic abuse. And under our current administration, it is no longer in law. So now this legislation, which previously used to protect a lot more women and provide for this equality, no longer is doing so as well as it did.
I disagree. If you want to look at the impact of the potential impact of an equal rights amendment, look no further than the state equal rights amendments that have already been passed. Professor Lee Epstein did a study from 1960 to 1990 where she examined sex discrimination cases in states and found that having a state ERA, while it did not impact cases directly, certainly had an indirect sort of impact on these sex discrimination cases where they would lean more in favor of women. States with an ERA tended to sort of lean more in favor of women in certain cases.
Okay. Has the 19th Amendment, let me put it this way, why haven't we had a woman president if women have been able to vote since at least 1920?
Well, I think that a large reason why we haven't been able to have a woman president is not some clear thing we can point to. I think it just is the fact that we still unfortunately live in this patriarchal society, which largely maintains its ascendance by making strong, ambitious, and powerful women appear threatening.
I completely agree. One example of how we've sort of seen sexism rear its head in an ugly way, look no further than the 2016 presidential election. A completely viral moment is when then candidate Trump referred to Hillary Clinton as a nasty woman.
Yeah. So how would an ERA, or would the ERA help with that at all, or are we still just going to have to live with the patriarchy for another century?
Although an ERA would not create effects instantly or even lasting ones, that takes years of social movement. I think it would solidify a lot of things and bring a satisfying step forward for the women's movement. The reason we don't have a woman president and things like that are because of current attitudes, and although an ERA would not change those, they would certainly help.
I think a better means to change this culture and make it more accepting toward women is to continue to back these progressive efforts like the Women's March and the Me Too movement, to really give more women a platform to raise the conversation, the dialogue between different people surrounding what needs to be done.
Yeah. I'm still hearing folks talk about cultural change, but not constitutional or legal change as the key way forward. Help me understand that.
Well, I think with the advent of technology and, like the accessibility of technology, I think that will really help social movements to create real change, because as you said, culture is the main thing that we do need to change. So I think as
we don't need the ERA.
Well, I do think we do need the ERA, because the ERA is a largely symbolic means in order to symbolize this equality.
If it's just a symbol, what's the point?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that although the ERA has so much controversy around it in terms of ratification, she thinks it's so necessary because she wants to look at the Constitution and see this is where women's rights are protected, to make it easier in future cases to have a reference, even if it is largely symbolic.
But I mean, you can argue that a national amendment isn't entirely necessary. We've seen super successful state amendments at the state level. So, for example, New Jersey has their own state ERA, which has been effective in assuring this equality and equal protection between the sexes.
Okay. So is Joe Biden's promise to never mind. We got the stop sign. Good stuff.
Oh,
good stuff.
Wonderful.
Glad to have had the conversation. Fellow judges, do you all want to do a couple comments?
I just want to say I think they nailed it. I really appreciate how much they have prepared. This is the at least what we've been talking about, the most difficult preparation any of us have ever had. Let's face it, we've all us older people have spent the last several weeks trying to figure out how to get the computer to work. You guys already know that, but you've had to prepare your material, and I'm sitting here trying not to cry because it was so good.
Thomas, you better go for it and save Rita.
I will. Look, these are in fact subtle, and they look easy, but in fact, with a little discussion and research, turns out these are difficult, rather subtle issues we're talking about here. And we asked you about the relationship between the 19th and the 14th in the Equal Protection Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. The ERA, is this cultural change or constitutional change? And you wouldn't stay on the horns of the dilemma. I thought that was very nicely done and cleverly done in some ways. So I thought that was useful. I'm the historian here, so I worry a little bit about zooming through time and space. In your opening, you talked about the Seneca Falls in 1848 and therefore 1920 and the 19th Amendment. Ooh, there's a lot of problem there, and differences. But if that's all I got to pick on, that's pretty bloody good. So I like what I heard, and this is really a talented group indeed.
I think that's true. Let me add the piece in terms of through time. It's tough because we think about Abigail Adams telling John Adams to remember the ladies. Then we get Seneca Falls in the mid-1800s. Then we get the 19th Amendment in 1920. And now we're still waiting on the ERA. It's a tough thing, right? It is a tough deal. And this country, we go back and forth on these issues, and getting to the cultural piece and the constitutional piece and the legal piece is rough stuff. But I think y'all did a really strong job, and it's always good to see New Jersey representing yet again. So y'all have a great one. I hope y'all have another 5 units. Not you guys personally, but I hope your team has another good 5 units, and we'll go from there. And it's certainly wonderful to see you. And one more salute to you, Alan. And I wish I could give the congratulations in person, but at some point we will see you again.
Yes. Thank you so much, Hank. And to all the judges, thank you so much for your input.
Absolutely.